I call the member for Moggill.
Mr Speaker, can I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And can I also congratulate you, Mr Speaker, on your appointment to high office and also acknowledge the re-election of the Palaszczuk Labor government. Mr Speaker, it is indeed a great privilege and honour to rise again as the state member for Moggill in the 56th Queensland Parliament. Mr Speaker, I'd like to formally place on record my thanks and appreciation to the residents and constituents of the electorate of Moggill for their trust and support in re-electing me to this place. Mr Speaker, at the outset, I would also like to acknowledge and thank my wife Jane and also Nicholas, Charlie, Angus and Lucy for their support, as well as ongoing words of advice and wisdom. Mr Speaker, I know all representatives here today join with me in acknowledging the sacrifices made by wives, husbands, partners, children and other family members of elected parliamentarians. Mr Speaker, I'd also like to recognise the service of former LNP opposition leaders, the Honourable Tim Nicholls MP, the member for Clayfield, and the Honourable Lawrence Springborg, the former member for Southern Downs during the 55th Queensland Parliament. And can I also congratulate the Honourable Deb Frecklington MP, the member for Nanango, on her ascendancy to the position of LNP leader. Mr Speaker, I am very proud to be a servant of my local area, a place which I call home and a place that has many distinct and unique communities. Moggill is also an electorate I grew up in. When I think of my childhood, I recall season after season playing for the Kenmore Cricket Club and the then Kenmore Soccer Club, now the University of Queensland Football Club, UQFC, as well as hours of riding BMX bikes around the streets of Kenmore, including Aberfeldy Street, Mab Street, Orkney Street, Rothsay Street, as well as Aldergrove Street and Chapel Hill, to name just a few. Mr Speaker, as is still the case today, I also recall being a part of many local community events and celebrations with family, friends and neighbours, including the Casterly, McPhee, Wareham, Bodmin, McDonald, Bristow, Ryan and Dukes families. In fact, Mr Speaker, in relation to one of the aforementioned families, I would like to acknowledge local Chapel Hill resident, Mr Bill Bristow AM, the founder and CEO of Angel Flight, as Bill has made an enormous contribution to Queensland and Australia by the establishment of his national charity and community service organisation, which assists those who are geographically isolated and in need of assistance to get to and from health appointments. Mr Speaker, as such, I take this opportunity to pay a tribute to both Bill and his wife Wendy with respect to their charity work. Also, Mr Speaker, to their granddaughter Amy Bristow, who has recently been inducted as a school captain at Brookfield State School for 2018. Mr Speaker, over my previous term as the state member for Moggill, I was certainly able to deliver significant funding for local community and sporting organisations, as well as provide for some important local road safety improvements. I also very much enjoyed the opportunity to assist many constituents with an extensive range of issues, and I look forward to continuing to do this again over the next 3 years. However, Mr Speaker, as was the case during my previous elected term, I will continue to argue for enhanced funded improvements to Moggill Road to ease traffic congestion, a sustainable solution to fix the Kenmore roundabout, as well as the delivery of an integrated road and public transport plan for the western suburbs of Brisbane, including the electorate of Moggill. This must be comprehensively funded as a priority. Despite the Palaszczuk Labor government failing to address these issues during its last term and Labor's ongoing opposition to an additional high school, as well as Labor's opposition to a proper investment in Kenmore State High School's infrastructure master plan, I will continue as the local state LNP member for Moggill to argue strongly for such infrastructure investment, and I will continue to be a champion for our area on these issues. Mr Speaker, Queensland, including the electorate of Moggill, also needs a state government that has proper strategies, solutions and plans to ease cost of living pressures, as well as policies which will assist with local job creation by supporting small business and, in doing so, will achieve real sustainable economic development. Mr Speaker, it is not good enough that under Labor, Queensland now has an unemployment rate of 6.1%. Mr Speaker, additional emergency services resourcing for local police, fire and ambulance stations in the electorate of Moggill must be planned for now, with transparent funding timelines able to be shared with local residents. Mr Speaker, at this most recent state election, held on the 25th of November 2017, both I and the Liberal National Party offered a commitment to progress and complete a set of integrated road and public transport solutions in collaboration with other levels of governments in order to alleviate traffic congestion. Mr Speaker, this was contingent upon the LNP winning government. Both I and the Liberal National Party also committed to the re-establishment of the Queensland Independent Schools Planning Commission in order to get the delivery of additional educational infrastructure right for the electorate of Moggill. The Liberal National Party also announced policies to freeze family car registration, reduce electricity prices and deliver energy security and energy reliability for residents of the Moggill electorate. Mr Speaker, we also outlined our plans to deliver a better healthcare system and to ensure more balanced environmental and key industry outcomes. Community safety was also a paramount consideration of ours and will continue to be so. Unfortunately, Mr Speaker, with the Palaszczuk State Labor government having been re-elected again, these election commitments cannot be delivered by the LNP during this term of government. However, all is not lost, Mr Speaker, as the local Labor candidate for Moggill at the 2017 state election, on behalf of the Queensland Labor Party and the Palaszczuk Labor government, gave a commitment that the Labor Party would fund infrastructure solutions to ease traffic congestion on Moggill Road if the two-party preferred margin was 5%. Given this is the case, Mr Speaker, any failure by the Labor Party and the Palaszczuk State Labor government to not deliver a strong financial investment of infrastructure funding in the upcoming state budget or subsequent budgets of this parliamentary term will lead to Labor being judged harshly by local residents, with many local constituents already believing that Labor's slogans and words for our local area are false, misleading and/or duplicitous. Mr Speaker, only time will tell, but I will certainly maintain an open door and consultative approach with this Labor government and other elected representatives in this place in order to get infrastructure solutions not only for the electorate of Moggill but also for right across the western suburbs of Brisbane. Mr Speaker, at this point I would like to acknowledge and pay a tribute to the former member for Indooroopilly, Scott Emerson, as well as the former member for Mount Ommaney, Tanya Smith, as both were unwavering in their commitment and service to their local communities and the Liberal National Party over many years. Mr Speaker, during the last term of Parliament, it was an honour to serve as the Shadow Minister for the Environment and Heritage Protection and the Shadow Minister for National Parks and the Great Barrier Reef. Mr Speaker, being able to achieve an endorsed LNP parliamentary position and then being able to provide bipartisan support for legislation enacting the Container Deposit Scheme, also known as the Container Refund Scheme, as well as a ban on single-use plastic bags, is something I'm enormously proud of, given the environmental benefits, reduced visual pollution, support for community groups and, in the case of the CDS, the additional jobs this scheme will create in Queensland. Mr Speaker, recently I attended a local launch of Boomerang bags at the Belbowrie Shopping Centre, along with the Moggill Girl Guides. Well done to Fran Alt, Natasha Alt, Alison Bond and all staff of the Belbowrie Brumbies Bakery, as well as Greengrocers Pantry, for their leadership in partnering with our local Girl Guides to reduce the local harms of plastic bags. Certainly, Fran Alt also makes an enormous contribution to our local community in collaboration with our local Moggill SES to vulnerable families by donating unsold bakery produce. Also, Mr Speaker, congratulations to Fran's granddaughter, George, who recently has been appointed to Kenmore State High School's Student Representative Council. Mr Speaker, the war on waste in Queensland must continue with ongoing efforts to reduce landfill, to reduce food waste and to implement a comprehensive plastic waste reduction strategy, which will reduce environmental and health harms, particularly those of microplastics. I wish my colleague, the member for Broadwater, David Crisafulli MP, all the best with such public policy considerations, as well as holding the Labor government to account in his new role as LNP Shadow Minister for the Environment, Science and the Great Barrier Reef and Shadow Minister for Tourism. Mr Speaker, I am delighted to have been given the additional roles in this parliamentary term of Shadow Minister for Communities, Shadow Minister for Disability Services and Seniors, Shadow Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships and Shadow Minister for the Arts. Having read a number of documents already, including Partnering for the Future, Advancing Queensland's Community Service Industry 2017 to 2025, as well as the Partnering for the Future Action Plan 2017 to 2018, there is clearly a range of significant community sector evolution and innovation occurring in relation to service provision, financial and funding arrangements, workforce development, as well as the capacity for technology to augment and enable better outcomes for all. Mr Speaker, resilient individuals, families and communities can achieve social wellbeing and enhance the economic productivity of Queensland. Fostering partnerships between government, not-for-profit service providers, tertiary organisations and the private sector can ensure effective service delivery, as well as enable best practice to be achieved via ongoing evidence-based translational research. Mr Speaker, there has also been a tremendous amount of collaborative work to date between our state jurisdiction of Queensland and the Commonwealth with respect to the implementation of the National Disability Insurance Scheme and the effective operation of the National Disability Insurance Agency. Mr Speaker, the complexity of this transformational change cannot be underestimated, and already I have been briefed on the significant efforts of collaboration and coordination being undertaken in order to ensure a smooth transition for all participants. Supporting those with a disability in our community to be connected and participate whilst also developing the capacity of communities to become more inclusive of those with a disability, is vitally important from a public policy perspective. Mr Speaker,